Hello once again, witchy people. The voice is back, but I'm still crafting. But that's not what I'm talking about today. Once again, not talking about anything in particular, but I am. Okay, so I had this thought about... Someone asked me, in real life, not online, how did I know, not that I was a witch, but what kind of witch I was? And I think unless you're part of the pagan community, so I just got to put my stamp back or else I'll lose it. Unless you're part of the pagan or witchcraft community, you won't get the answer. But it is a question that is often asked. What kind of witch am I? For me, it was easy. And I think for most people into basics, it is easy. And here's how. So if you like structure and being taught a certain way to do things, then you go into a tradition, whether that be Dianic, Alexandrian, Gardnerian, whatever. But you go into a tradition. I don't know how you attach yourself to a coven. But you don't have to. I mean, I suppose you could always ask, but that's not the point. So, and sort of like the rules, if you like, what you can and can't do, and what the best way to do things for each tradition are laid out in a lot of places, online, in books. You can buy so many books these days. So if you like that kind of structure, and you like being taught and shown how to do something, then that would be the best way for you. Now, of course, then there's also within that, what pantheon, what gods, goddesses do you associate with? Can you find some kind of closeness to? And using that, so if you find yourself thinking a lot about maybe Egyptian gods, then that kind of tradition that encompasses a lot of Egyptian historical facts and such like, and gods and goddesses, that will be the tradition that you should build your craft upon. So how about if you haven't found a pantheon, a god or goddess, these correspondences, these spiritual entities that you kind of have a vibe with? What if you haven't found them? Then perhaps you don't have them. Now, for me, being a hedge witches don't often have like main gods and goddesses. And if we do, we kind of switch around and pick and choose what we want. So I've always had an interest in Lilith. Because maybe I have a lot of Jewish heritage in my family. Maybe this is why. Hecate and Hestia are two also that I've always found a bit interesting. And also Herne. Now I know sort of like that's connected with sort of like Kurunos or Serunos, however you like to say it, the horned god. But maybe that's because I was brought up on tales of, Robin Hood and such like. And so I've always had this fascination with Herne the Hunter, which is a horned forest god. It's a horned forest spirit, father of the forest. I've also had a fascination with the Green Man. And I see that as part also of kind of like the pantheon that I make up for myself. I don't always stick to one sort of, so I might have a bit from Greek, a bit from Roman, a bit from Celtic, or a bit from Italian, a bit from Judaism, a bit, there's all sorts, and you can pick your pantheon in that way, because to me it's what, if you feel a connection, then that's the connection that you use. There's no point saying, well, this is the pantheon that I'm stuck with, therefore I must pick everything out there, even if I don't really feel connection. And if you're not feeling a connection to a lot of certain gods and goddesses from one pantheon, then maybe, sort of one tradition, maybe you are not quite in the right tradition, or maybe you should mix it up a bit and not be totally adherent to one tradition. So obviously there's whether you want to be part of a coven. The easiest way to do that these days, to be honest, is an online coven, or whether you want to be more solo as a hedge witch. Hedge witches tend to be quite lonesome creatures. I don't mind sharing. It's just that because no hedge witch tradition, because it's not, hedge witchery is specific to area, family, history, culture. Every hedge witch path is going to be slightly different. So we kind of don't share, because although we don't mind sharing, we don't share, and we don't sort of like connect with other hedge witches so much. Maybe because we know we're so very different. Although we do connect with other hedge witches, and we understand that sort of that path, we don't necessarily agree with everything. And in any tradition, although you won't hear this very often, it's okay to disagree, because the minute you start being tied down, and this is obviously just my point of view, the minute you start getting tied down to one tradition, and that tradition tells you how everyone should react, you are getting into a very organised religion sort of territory. And I feel that is kind of like the antithesis of being a witch. So, I'm not saying that we're all disorganised. All I'm saying is that if you get into that sort of like organised religion bracket, then you're taking away your freedom, and being this sort of like freedom and free-forming sort of person is what makes you really, is what being a witch is all about. It's being very independent, but also being part of something and being included in something. So, getting off topic again. So what if you decide that you are one kind of witch and then that doesn't work for you? Then that's okay. There is a lot of eclecticism in witchcraft and witchcraft traditions. In being a witch, most witches are very, very eclectic. In fact, I think a lot of witches, when they first sort of like realise this is what they are, and start knowing that they're a witch and start giving themselves that label, and then they're asked, what kind of witch are you? Most will say eclectic. I'm an eclectic witch. So the other thing is, can you be several different types of witches? Yes, you can. You can be a herb witch, a sea witch. You can have all these if you like labels. I'm not saying labels are bad, because some labels are really good. But you can be several different witches at the same time. So you could be a Dianic sea witch, which kind of doesn't really make sense, because obviously Diana, forest, okay, huntress. So I've got to keep my window open. It's a really lovely day. So But you can, because being this amazing being, which, okay, everyone's amazing, but to me, being a witch is being amazing. It's fantastic. You have the freedom, and, you know, the choice is yours. You can be lots of different things. You aren't tied down. And in all honesty, when people ask me, what sort of witch are you? If they're a non-pagan person, what they usually mean is, are you a black witch or are you a white witch? And that really, really angers me. Because that's such a diversive way of looking at things. So, you know, that's like asking someone, are you a good person or a bad person? And no one's pure good or pure bad. Probably. You know, even the most evil people have some things about them that may surprise you of being quite nice, decent things. And even the most decent, wonderful, good person can have a streak of meanness running through them. So, yes. So don't, you know, I think the first thing is, if you are coming out of the broom closet and you are saying, look, I am a witch, I am a pagan, and people want to pin you down, you don't have to be pinned down. But also, it's okay to change. You know, you can say, you know, oh, I'm a trainee. If you want to make up your own kind of path and therefore your own kind of tradition completely, that's up to you. The other question that I find outside of paganism and witchcraft, people find quite difficult to comprehend, and I must admit I did for a while, was how you can be a Christian witch. Because Christianity, in its more modern form, and I'm talking about modern from maybe sort of like the 1500s, before prehistory sort of thing, Christianity was, you know, because the Bible has been translated by a man for a man, and it was actually translated by men for men. There is a lot that isn't very clear, and there was a lot that was used, like witch. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live, which is one of the most oft referred to bits of the Bible. When you're a witch, people will tell it, you'll get it quoted to you at some point or another, and quite often, you know, you'll get it quoted, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. If you actually take the original language and then try to find where it says that, you won't find it, because it doesn't actually say that. That's just the way it was translated and given in the King James's Bible as an example, translated from the Latin, because it's translated from like Hebrew and ancient Greek and all sorts of ancient languages into Latin, and then into sometimes French, English, whatever. The translation will get lost. So what I'm saying is, if you want to be a Christian witch, it doesn't necessarily mean that you follow the Christian Bible, but you have a Christian religious background, and that's where your faith lies. Being a witch doesn't necessarily mean that you're part of a religion. For some people it does. A lot of people feel that Wicca is the religion of witchcraft, but you can be a Christian Wiccan, apparently. And like I said, this is why choosing your path isn't a lifetime thing, isn't a lifetime permanent decision, in the same way that choosing your sexuality doesn't have to be a permanent lifetime decision. It's a fluid and changeable thing. your path is fluid and changeable. It's an aspect of your spirituality and your witchcraft and your craft that is very adaptable. So you don't have to put a label on yourself. But if you do, and you're worried, what kind of witch am I? Just look into it. So you have the basics of the so you know, like you have paganism, then you have witchcraft, which is a part of, comes under the umbrella term of paganism. Then you have your different main sort of paths within witchcraft. So you have traditions of witchcraft. And okay, so there are a lot of people within specific traditions who will say that if you're eclectic, you're not a witch. If you're not part of a tradition, you're not a witch. To me, these people have got far too much into the organisation of witchcraft, and that, like I said once again, like I said before, that organisation sort of religion feel of it is taking away from what witchcraft really is. It's taking away from the freedom. So you can be part of an established tradition. You can make your own tradition. You can be like a hedge witch, which is, you know, quite, you know, a herb witch, a green witch. Or you can just be witch. Now, the reason why I chose to be a hedge witch, I didn't choose. The reason why the label is stuck is because I work with different worlds. I straddle the hedge. I have one foot in the world that we know as the world that we live in and experience every day, and I can step and have another foot in another world, and for me it happens to be the world of the dead and the spirit world. That doesn't necessarily mean that I talk to ghosts all day, and it doesn't mean to say that my life is like that of watching Medium or something like that, the TV show Medium. It's nothing like that. And that isn't the only aspect of witchcraft that is part of me, but it is just, it's really hard to describe witchcraft and being a witch, because it's who you are, not part of who you are. So you are a witch, you are a witch. And within that, you can have different aspects of witchcraft within you. It is so hard to explain. But if you're a pagan or a witch, you will understand exactly what I just said. So, if you live by the sea, for instance, and you work a lot with the sea, you pick and choose your goddesses and your gods through the sea, or maybe through tides, and work with the tides and how the moon affects the tides and everything else, then you could be a sea witch. If you live near a forest, or you find a certain affiliation with the forest, and you find yourself working with a lot of nymphs and dryads that are associated with the forest, and a lot of gods that are associated with the forest, then you could be a forest witch, or a mountain witch. Or, you know, if you worked with mountain, and the animals that you have a connection with can also help define your path, if you want your path defined. So I find myself very connected to things. I love bees. I love bees. Hares. I love hares. Squirrels, badgers. I like woodland creatures in general, but I also like otters and things like that. But most of the creatures that I find that I really appeal to me are land creatures rather than water creatures. So I'm not really a sea witch or a river witch. I don't have that sort of connection. You could just call yourself a country witch or a green witch. It's very easy in this day and age to look into the habits, shall I say, of each kind of path. Some hedge witches are hedge witches because they work with hedges. And I'm being totally honest here. This is, I mean, hedge witches, any hedge witch will tell you, we think we're an ancient pathway. The word hedge witch is a relatively new term. I think it popped up somewhere in the 70s or 60s. It's a relatively new phrase, even though the path which we follow is much older than that, because a lot of us do think about and base our path on folklore and superstitions and sort of like old wives' tales, that sort of thing. So, but you know, we're quite happy to take on modern life, and I think that's the whole thing. Is you can't. I mean, a lot of people claim to be hereditary witches. We're all hereditary witches because the way we practice witchcraft is very much depending on nature and the signs that nature gives us, as our ancestors did. And in that way you can say that all our ancestors were witches, because at some point that's what they all did. You know, they followed the seasons. They needed the wheel of the year, even if they didn't call it the wheel of the year, but they understood it. They understood, you know, how the moon affected the tides, and, you know, and affected even how you felt, and, you know, how certain smells even can make you feel better. So because we base all witchcraft on this sort of wheel of the year and seasons, and using nature as part or as a complement to our path, we can all say that we're hereditary witches, because somewhere along the line we've all come from that. Like I said, you know, even if obviously you didn't call yourself a witch, how people lived, you know, maybe 700, 800, 900 years ago is a lot of what I think we feel witchcraft is. So in choosing your path, which is what this video started off as, how, you know, what kind of witch am I? How do I choose my path? You just live it. And as you live it, you will find you'll kind of fit in somewhere. And if you don't fit in anywhere, then you're probably a hedge witch or just a witch. And the other thing you have to, like I said, you have to accept that your path is changeable and it's adaptable. So you can't maybe expect always to be one particular type of witch, even though you'll always be a witch. Even if you deny that you're a witch any longer, to me you're probably still a witch, because that it's part of who you are. It is who you are. It's not, you know, because I don't see witchcraft as a religion. It's a spirituality. It's part of your psyche almost. Well, it is. It's not something I think you can choose to be. You just are. Just sometimes you get to realise that you are, and sometimes you wish you weren't. But if your path does not change and cannot be adapted, it will stagnate. Your path, your choices will stagnate. And if they stagnate, and stop growing and stop changing and adapting, then it becomes useless. So I think regardless, you have to always expect to not quite follow the same path all the time and expect it to be the same all the time. So what kind of witch am I? The question. Sometimes it's nice not to know. Sometimes it's, if someone just says, what kind of witch are you? You just say, I'm just a witch. You don't have to put a label on it. But if you do, like I said, look it up. There are books. There are free sites, obviously, on the internet everywhere. There are even free downloadable books. Look on your family history. But like I said, sometimes the kind of witch you are, if you are not attaching yourself to a specific tradition and being accepted, and it's a two-way thing, by the tradition. You have to accept them, they have to accept you, sort of thing, kind of thing. Then I think you have to look at your own beliefs, yes, but also your, like, in that, your culture, where you live, why you live the way you do, and those will help you dictate your path. So I'm not saying how do you know you're a such and such witch. All I'm saying is you have to, you can't just expect to know. Some of us do, you know, but not everyone can just suddenly know what kind of witch they are. It's a path that evolves, and it's okay not to say I'm a witch one day and then decide what kind of witch you are straight away. It's okay not to do that. It's okay to take your time and be adaptable and changeable. So there you go. That was just what was on my mind today, and I thought I'd get it out there. As you can see, my room is still a mess, and it's been, that's it. I have a log basket. I don't have a log fire, unfortunately, but I do have a log basket, and the cats have taken over, so I had to put the cat blankets in the bottom. Actually, the puppy, when the dog was a puppy, the blanket is in the bottom there. Anyway, yeah, so thank you for popping in and joining me in my covenstead and my craft room, and I will be back very soon. Thank you for watching, witchy people. Bye for now.